Where are you right now in terms of your
It's very, very strange, isn't it? I mean, one's, cultural, ethnic identity. I mean, when I was in Singapore, when I was living in Singapore, I thought of myself as Chinese, right? Because, it fits one of the four categories, right? Chinese, Malay, Indians, and others, right? Those are official categories. So I don't probably think of myself as Chinese, and my nationality is Singapore. And then on this trip back home, I discovered from my father that my great-grandmother is actually Peranakan. I always thought that it must be something because I guess my coloring and my facial features is not exactly I think there's something else there besides Chinese, and so that shifted a little bit. I don't know what I will make of that. I've just thought it at the back of my head at the moment, and so I think it's so contingent. One's ethnic identity is so contingent on what the categories that society offers us. Four categories in Singapore, and it's so contingent on what we know of ourselves at the moment. So right now, if you're asking what I identify, I can tell you something, but it's also a very contingent identity. I feel very much like a Singaporean in New York, because of course, I'm not an American, and therefore I feel very Singaporean. Do I feel very Chinese? I do somewhat, but not as strongly as I do here. That's a strange thing. And New York is so heterogeneous, right? That I didn't feel particularly Chinese. But in the last 3 years, I actually visited China for the first time 3 years ago, and that actually fed into one of the poems that you heard as well just now about China. And it's always strange going to a place that I wanted to resist it. I wanted to say, I am not Chinese. I am as in a Chinese in China. A Chinese. But at the same time, when I was there, I felt comfortable too, in a particular manner, comfortable enough to actually to write about it afterwards. So I don't know. I'm trying very hard to put it into words, but I don't know. I wouldn't identify very strongly as Chinese right now. It seems to be what other people say I am, rather than what I would exert myself to be. I think we were talking also just now earlier, or we were looking at the questions, that there's also the group in America called Asian Americans, right? And what is my relationship to them? Because very often people who do not know me, but they publish my work, they would like to categorize me as Asian American, because that's what I look like, or that's what my name looks like. And for me, it's also been a journey. First of all, of course, I have a very, very different growing up experiences from Asian Americans growing up in America. So I don't feel Asian American in that way. But it has been for me a journey of, I think, understanding where the Asian Americans come from, and feeling as if there's something that they're doing there. Redefining identity not as a label, but as a kind of political grouping that enables one to establish oneself in society, to gain a foothold, to gain visibility, or identity as a political weapon that feels to me as it can be potentially very empowering. And so I would at the moment see myself as a kind of ally, to their aims, their political and literary aims, although I cannot consider myself Asian American.
How and why did you decide to come out?
How and why? Oh gosh. How first maybe? It's always an easier question, right? I really couldn't. I couldn't come out here. I was fearful. I was too afraid. I was a teacher. So you knew what that means, all right? You could be thrown out of your job. I couldn't come out to my parents here. It just felt too close, too near. I didn't have a conception really when I was here, because I was living, behind such blinkers, that what gay means. Gay to me was, the cross-dressers, transvestites in Changi Village, and to my mind, that was not me. I had not slept with a man, so how do I know? Maybe it's all in my head. You know what I mean? All these, besetting confusions and doubts. And so I thought I need to leave the country in order to find out whether I am. And I actually joined a couple of groups that proved to be very helpful, supportive. I joined a gay Asian men's group in New York, and for the first time sat in a room with all gay Asian men. I remember when I was there in the room, I was like, don't cross your legs. Because I didn't want to appear feminine, I was like, okay. It's silly things like that, you just, it's so instinctive, it's the body, speaking. But that was, enormously helpful to see others who look like me and who, were able to share their own experiences coming out. And then I was actually also in a coming out group with 4 other people. It was kind of like a group counseling session kind of thing. And they all came from different walks of life, there were different ethnicities. And so I too was able to benefit from that. So that was how. Why does one come out? Why does one fall in love? Why does one, get into a relationship? I want that too, just as any straight person does. I was lonely, and that was it really, I guess. So it's not very different, I guess, from any one of us who seek to kind of break out, of this, prison of the self and relate to others, frankly, honestly, as who we are.
You have a particular concept for each book.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a bit about each book and how you have changed?
Right. Thank you. Koh Jee Leong, as I said, was a series of sonnets, and my first book, Equal to the Earth, I wrote in various, traditional Western forms. Maybe that's what you're referring to, such as, the villanelle and the sestina, and I wrote in meter and rhyme. And then in my next book, 7 Studies for Self-Portrait, the book comprises 7 sequences. Each sequence has a particular form, but they all form a kind of lens on the self, a different way of looking at the self. And then, of course, the pillow book is more a collection of prose poems. So, one can, I guess, see the evolution as an evolution of forms. And I think in America, anyway, for many of us who are in the know, there is this silly division of American poetry into free verse and formal verse. It's such a crude, not useful, useless, all right, distinction to make, because if you're going to write a good poem, it has to be in some form, right, or another. Otherwise, it's not a poem. It's shapeless. It's formless. And so, for a while, I was certainly learning my craft and writing a lot of poems in traditional forms. Traditionally Western forms. And then I decided, I really need a bigger conception of what form is about. And I think that has led my exploration in 7 Studies, as well as in the pillow book, to find out what forms are like. So in 7 Studies for Self-Portrait, for example, it ends with a sequence of ghazals. And I hope I'm saying this right too. It's basically a series of independent couplets, Arabic in origin, but has migrated to but was also written in Persian and then later on in Urdu in India and Pakistan. And that was revelatory to me, because how could you actually jump from couplet to couplet freely without any kind of narrative or logical link, right? But it's still a form, tied together by its repeating word. And then, of course, reading Sayash on and coming to that too. So it has been a process of widening conception of what, in my mind, what form can be, from a very British, Anglo-centric conception, hopefully to a bigger, more worldly conception. But that's one thing. That's, I think, on the formal level. But another thing, I guess, is just writing more simply and clearly. I think, like many beginning poets, when I first write, I feel as if I need to show off. I need to hide my ideas and my feelings, behind symbols and all that. Of course, metaphors is very much the stuff of poetry, but I find myself writing more and more simply and plainly, and finding that plainness carrying an emotional charge too. I am certainly a believer in clarity. I believe that, when you can read a poem and understand it for the first time, I hope. You can read one of my poems and understand it for the first time. There's nothing hidden in it. Right? But you can also read it many times and get more out of it. I hope that is the effect of my poetry.
Okay, we've kept many of you standing for a long time, and we've kept you from Kenny's wonderful books. So we'll bring this event to a close. Let's thank Jee Leong, and also thank you everyone for coming.